We've all heard the tales: horned helmets, brutal raids, and the thunderous war cries of Norse warriors striking terror into the hearts of European coastal villages. But history holds a fascinating twist that rarely makes it into popular documentaries. There existed a mysterious people who turned the tables on these legendary raiders. While monks trembled at the sight of dragon-prowed ships on the horizon, Viking warriors themselves whispered warnings about venturing too far into certain northern territories. These lands belonged to a people so fierce, so enigmatic, that even the battle-hardened Norse approached with uncharacteristic caution, if they dared approach at all. In the mist-shrouded borderlands where northern Finland meets Russia's Kola Peninsula, existed a people known to the Norse as the Biamians. Unlike other groups that fell quickly under Viking dominance, the Biamians maintained their autonomy throughout the Viking Age, controlling the valuable trade routes along the White Sea and the resource-rich territories surrounding it. Archaeological excavations in the region have uncovered settlements with sophisticated fortifications dating from 800 to 1100 CE, precisely the period when Viking expansion was at its peak elsewhere. What made the Biamians particularly formidable was their mastery of the harsh taiga environment, a landscape of dense forests, freezing temperatures reaching -40 degrees Celsius, and long periods of either constant darkness or midnight sun. While Vikings were unquestionably skilled seafarers, the Biamians moved through these frozen forests with a speed and silence that contemporary accounts described as ghost-like, or as if melting into the trees themselves. The Byzantine historian Michael Attaliates, writing in the 11th century, noted that even the Rus Vikings from what is now Sweden and Ukraine speak with unusual restraint about the forest people of the far north, claiming they can strike without warning and disappear without trace. Archaeological evidence supports this reputation. Biamian hunting weapons show sophisticated design elements that suggest specialized stealth tactics, including arrows designed for minimal sound and maximum penetration through the heavy furs worn by Norse warriors. Perhaps most telling is what's found in Viking burial sites within 100 kilometers of Biamian territory. Defensive weapons and protective amulets appear with much greater frequency than in Viking graves elsewhere, suggesting warriors expecting particularly dangerous opposition. One remarkable find from a chieftain's burial near modern-day Arkhangelsk included a runic warning etched into a sword hilt: "Beware the watchers in the White Forest." A rare acknowledgement of fear from a culture that typically celebrated death in battle as the ultimate honor. The Norse sagas, while often blending history with mythology, provide our most detailed window into Viking encounters with the Biamians. The Egil's saga, composed in the 13th century, but recounting events from the 10th century, describes a raid led by the legendary warrior Thorolf Kveldulfsson into Biamian territory. What begins as a typical Viking expedition quickly transforms into a cautionary tale. They came upon the Biamians in the night, when these people melted like shadows between the trees. Thorolf's men found themselves surrounded, though they saw no army. Arrows came from all directions, striking with uncanny accuracy even in the darkness. Of 30 men who ventured inland, only 7 returned to their ships. The saga of Urva Odder contains an even more striking account, describing how a band of Vikings had to abandon their traditional battle formation when ambushed by Biamians. They attacked like no men we had faced before, appearing suddenly from the snow itself, striking and vanishing again. Our shield wall became useless when they would not stand before us. The Ynglinga saga offers perhaps the most telling insight into the psychological impact these encounters had on Viking warriors. It records a Norse chieftain's advice to his son: "Seek glory in the western lands, Britain Island, for the eastern forests belong to those who know secrets we do not. Men who go there seeking plunder often return without honor, if they return at all." However, because they depart from typical saga narratives, Viking literature rarely acknowledged fear or defeat at the hands of other tribes. instead portraying Norse warriors as the supreme fighters of their age. These admissions of vulnerability and caution stand out as unusual historical truths that survived even the saga writer's tendency toward glorification. The Vikings' apprehension wasn't merely superstition. Archaeological and historical evidence reveals the Bjarmians employed combat strategies that specifically countered Norse advantages. While Vikings excelled at shield wall formations and direct confrontation, the Bjarmians developed asymmetric warfare techniques that rendered these tactics ineffective. Excavations of Bjarmian hunting grounds have uncovered specialized weapons designed for stealth and ambush. Their arrows featured innovative fletching that significantly reduced flight noise, allowing archers to remain undetected even after multiple shots. Analysis of these arrowheads shows they were specifically designed to penetrate the layered leather and limited chainmail that Viking raiders typically wore. The Bjarmians also mastered winter warfare in ways that gave them overwhelming territorial advantage. Artifacts discovered at settlement sites include early versions of skis that were narrower and more maneuverable than those used by Vikings, allowing rapid deployment through deep snow. Some burial sites contain specialized footwear with retractable bone spikes, essentially primitive crampons, enabling movement across icy terrain that would leave Viking warriors struggling to maintain footing. Beyond their skill in navigating harsh terrain, the Bjarmians also employed hunting techniques adapted for human targets. Historical accounts describe elaborate traps set along forest paths, forcing Vikings to choose between trudging through deep snow or following trails that might conceal deadfalls or snares. The 12th century Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus described a particularly effective Bjarmian tactic. They would allow a small Viking party to penetrate their territory unchallenged, then cut off their retreat by felling trees across their path, before attacking from all sides. Their night raids on Viking camps were perhaps the most terrifying. Multiple Norse sources describe warriors who could approach sleeping encampments without alerting sentries, sometimes killing several men before anyone realized they were under attack. This ability to strike without warning created a psychological terror that deeply affected Vikings, whose own reputation relied heavily on being the unpredictable aggressors rather than the vulnerable targets. Beyond their military prowess, certain Bjarmian cultural practices fundamentally unsettled Viking sensibilities, creating a psychological barrier that often proved more effective than physical defenses. Archaeological evidence from Bjarmian burial sites reveals funerary customs that would have appeared deeply taboo to Norse observers. Unlike Viking burials, which typically included weapons and personal possessions, Bjarmian graves often contained ritualistic items arranged in geometric patterns that archaeologists believe held astronomical significance. Viking observers were particularly struck by the Bjarmians' mortuary practices. While Vikings typically honored their dead through ship burials or cremation, accounts suggest that the Bjarmians preserved their chieftains' remains through a method resembling mummification. Ibn Fadlan, a 10th century Arab diplomat, recorded descriptions of northern tribes keeping the remains of their ancestors intact. This approach to honoring the dead contrasted with Viking customs, which emphasized specific funerary rites. The Bjarmian social structure also challenged Norse understanding. Evidence suggests they maintained a non-patriarchal society where women held significant military and leadership roles. The Varangian chronicler Nikephoros noted, "Among these people, both men and women defend their territory with equal ferocity, and a woman's arrow finds its mark as surely as a man's." For Viking raiders, accustomed to facing male warriors and viewing women primarily as non-combatants, encountering female fighters would have disrupted their tactical expectations and cultural assumptions. The Bjarmians maintained strict territorial boundaries, marked by distinctive carved posts that served as warnings to outsiders. Archaeological finds reveal these markers featured depictions of predatory animals and abstract symbols in a style distinct from Norse artistic traditions. Viking accounts describe these boundary markers in uneasy terms, suggesting they considered crossing these thresholds as tempting both physical danger and supernatural consequences. The Bjarmians' most formidable advantage lay in their profound adaptation to one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. While Vikings were certainly hardy seafarers, accustomed to harsh North Atlantic conditions, the deep taiga and tundra landscapes of the White Sea region presented challenges beyond their experience. Modern climate data shows this region experiences temperature extremes ranging from -45 degrees Celsius in winter to 30 degrees Celsius in summer, fluctuations that require specialized knowledge to navigate safely. Archaeological evidence reveals the Bjarmians developed technological innovations specifically tailored to these conditions. Excavations at settlement sites have uncovered sophisticated semi-subterranean dwellings that maintained remarkably stable internal temperatures. Analysis of these structures shows they combined principles of insulation and thermal mass that exceed the efficiency of contemporary Viking longhouses by a significant margin. One particularly well-preserved dwelling discovered near modern-day Severodvinsk maintained an estimated internal temperature of 15 degrees Celsius, even when external temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius, all without continuous firing of hearths. The Bjarmians' winter mobility technologies gave them a decisive tactical advantage. While Vikings essentially ceased major land operations during deep winter, the Bjarmians maintained activity year-round. Specialized ski designs found in Bjarmian territories feature a distinctive asymmetrical pattern, one ski shorter and wider for pushing, one longer and narrower for gliding. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated these designs allow speeds up to 15 kilometers per hour across snow, faster than a Viking in full gear could run on cleared ground. Contemporary accounts describe how Bjarmians use natural features as defensive infrastructure. The Arab geographer al-Idrisi, compiling information from northern traders, noted, "These forest people know when the ice will bear weight and when it will break. They lead pursuers onto lakes where the ice appears solid but will shatter beneath armed men." Modern glaciologists confirm that the region's freeze-thaw cycles create precisely these conditions, where ice thickness can vary dramatically within short distances. Equally remarkable was their ability to navigate their territory with precision. Analysis of settlement patterns shows strategic positioning that balanced resource access with defense. Viking accounts frequently mention becoming disoriented in Bjarmian forests, while the locals moved effortlessly without visible markers. The Norse chronicler Oddr Snorrason wrote with reluctant admiration, "They move through their forests as easily in darkness as in daylight, while our bravest warriors become lost within sight of shore." While many encounters between Vikings and Bjarmians remain shrouded in legend, several historically verified confrontations demonstrate the practical reality behind Viking apprehension. Archaeological evidence corroborates these accounts, providing tangible proof of Norse defeats that rarely appear in their own historical narrative. The most thoroughly documented conflict occurred during Thorehund's expedition of 1026 CE. Contemporary accounts in both Norse sagas and Russian chronicles describe how this prominent Norwegian chieftain led a substantial force, estimated at 300 warriors in 3 longships, into Bjarmian territory seeking trade advantages and tribute. The expedition began successfully with initial trading, but when Thorir's forces attempted to raid a Bjarmian sacred site, the response was swift and devastating. Archaeological excavations near the White Sea coast have uncovered what appears to be the aftermath of this very conflict. A mass grave containing approximately 40 individuals, buried with Norse weapons and personal items dating to the early 11th century. Skeletal analysis reveals injuries consistent with ambush tactics. A high proportion of wounds to the rear of the skull and back, suggesting attacks from behind. Carbon dating confirms these remains to the precise period of Thorir's expedition. The Varangian Chronicle provides additional context, noting, "Of Thorir's 3 ships that sailed east, only one returned to Norway, so reduced in men that boys had to help work the oars. This represents a casualty rate approaching 70%, catastrophic for a Viking expedition, and the type of defeat that would generate lasting caution. Another significant encounter, known as the Battle of Sleeping Fires from Norse accounts, demonstrates the Biamians' defensive sophistication. In approximately 995 CE, an expeditionary force led by Erik Hakonarson attempted a winter raid, reasoning that frozen waterways would provide easy access to Biamian settlements. Excavations near the Devina River have revealed a carefully prepared defensive position. Concealed fire pits containing oil-soaked materials that could be ignited on command, creating sudden walls of flame to channel attacking forces into prepared ambush positions. The Norse account describes the outcome bluntly. The forest people let them penetrate deep into the frozen river, then surrounded them with fires that sprang from the ice itself. Caught between flames and hidden archers, Erik's force was reduced to half before they fought free. Archaeological finds reveal Viking adaptations in response to these conflicts. Excavations of 11th century Norse settlements show a distinct modification to shields and armor among warriors known to have engaged with Biamians. Increased protection to the rear and flanks, additional leather reinforcement against arrow strikes, and the introduction of specialized face protection beyond what was typically used in other Viking conflicts. These adaptations speak to hard-earned knowledge of Biamian tactics and represent a significant investment in defensive rather than offensive capability, unusual for Viking military development. Despite frequent conflict, necessity drove Vikings and Biamians into complex trade relationships. While battles shaped their interactions, so did commerce, creating a structured exchange network that ensured goods flowed in both directions. One of the most striking pieces of evidence is the Kolmogeri hoard, discovered in 1989. This cache of 1,700 silver coins and trade goods reveals a blend of Byzantine, Arabic, and Norse silver, some marked with Biamian ownership. Its dating suggests that trade persisted even at the height of hostilities, proving economic ties could override warfare. Viking sites along the North Sea contain clear traces of Biamian influence, including high-quality furs, Baltic amber, and walrus ivory crafted with distinctive techniques. Even their food supply benefited. Analysis of Viking cooking vessels shows evidence of Biamian fish preservation methods that greatly extended storage life. In return, Biamians received Norse iron tools, textiles, and exotic goods from distant markets like Baghdad and Constantinople. The organized distribution of these items suggests structured trade rather than sporadic plunder. Historical sources further confirm these exchanges. The Gortrek saga describes designated neutral trading zones where neither side held an advantage, while Othere of Hålogaland's account mentions a silent bartering system where goods were exchanged without direct negotiation. Archaeological findings support this, with excavations near Kandalaksha revealing hybrid trade structures designed for winter exchanges. Separate entrances and strategically placed fire pits allowed both sides to conduct business while maintaining a cautious distance. Biamian resistance shaped Viking expansion, creating a stable eastern boundary throughout the Viking Age. While Vikings spread west, south, and along Russian rivers, their presence in Biamian lands remained limited to trade outposts. This was not due to geography alone, but to the effectiveness of Biamian defenses, which created a lasting barrier to Norse settlement. Over time, a distinct frontier zone emerged, blending Norse and Biamian influences but preventing full Norse control. This borderland saw cultural exchange, yet it remained a line Vikings rarely crossed in force. As a result, Norse traders were forced to seek alternative routes, leading to their deepening presence in Russian river networks and contributing to the rise of Kievan Rus. Unlike many groups absorbed into Norse spheres, the Biamians retained their identity well into the 12th century. historical records and genetic studies confirm minimal Norse influence beyond this frontier, reinforcing how their resistance shaped the long-term geopolitical landscape of Northern Europe. However, the Bjarmians were one of the few forces that stopped the Vikings in their tracks, but not every enemy they faced was human. Imagine being deep in the frozen wilderness, only to hear the chilling howls of a wolf pack closing in. How did the Vikings survive these terrifying encounters? Click on this video here to find out.